Okay, folks. So here's the deal with what's going on right now. So there's a bunch of news going on with Nostalrius kind of denouncing private servers and making a big press release about this. And Elysium responded, and the whole community's freaking out. I'm not going to repeat everything line by line, but the links to the Nostalrius announcement and the Elysium response and a few other things are in the description below the video, so please read them for yourself. I think there's already been a bunch of people that have made YouTube videos discussing this, and most people seem to reread it. I think most people have probably read the announcements already, so we're not going to talk about that. However, my thought on the process is that there's two things that are going on here. So for Nostalrius to make this announcement, there's two scenarios that I think are going on. And let's talk about the first one is, let's imagine that Nostalrius makes this announcement where they tell people to stop emulating private servers, and they ask Elysium to back off and not use the Nostalrius core or Nostalrius database. Let's imagine Nostalrius has made this announcement, and they've done so under their own pretenses. They're not being pushed by Blizzard or anyone else. So why would Nostalrius do this? Like, what is their motivation to suddenly seem to back out of private server emulation, despite obviously supporting it for well over almost 2 years now since Nostalrius first launched, and they've been working on this at least a couple years, probably before that, developing their core. So they've been in this for years now. So why would Nostalrius do this? And it's hard to wrap your head around any motivation as why they would suddenly back out and think that the best step forward is to just stop doing private servers. So my thought on this is that it's a little bit nonsensical. It doesn't really make sense and seems to be like a full 180 compared to what Nostalrius had been doing the last few years. So my thought on this is that they either legitimately, honestly believe that the best way to convince Blizzard to make private servers is to, or not private servers, to make legacy servers, is to give up private servers. And I just don't think Nostalrius actually believes that. Like, after all the time they've spent with emulation and with the private server scene and legacy server movement, as a lot of people call it, I just cannot understand how Nostalrius would think that giving up private servers would be the way to go to convince Blizzard. It seems like all along, Nostalrius' goal has been to show Blizzard that there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that want to play on private servers. So if that's the case, then maybe Blizzard should see the economic advantage to making their own legacy servers. That's been the kind of format in which Nostalrius has pushed the legacy server movement. And I don't really like calling it a movement. I feel like that gives it a bigger name than it really... when I think of a movement, I think of like the civil rights movement in the U.S., like, something that people died over, not a video game movement. And I kind of hesitate to put the word movement on the legacy servers, but that's maybe a way to describe it. So Nostalrius seems like they're doing a 180. It doesn't make any sense. So I've had a really hard time understanding why they would do that. The one possibility is perhaps they believe that doing this makes them out to be the villain, and in any good story you need a hero and you need a villain. And I think having that kind of good cop, bad cop balance can allow a lot more people to talk about legacy servers again, and maybe get the hype back up, and maybe get larger gaming outlets like IGN or GameSpot to cover things. So that's the one motivation that I can see as being a legitimate reason Nostalrius would do this 180 all of a sudden. Because now Nostalrius is placing themselves as the villain in this fight, and it sounds silly, but in doing so, they're basically getting more publicity. If you look, there are tons of YouTube videos now about this controversy. Tons of people making videos about this. The Reddit WoW servers subreddit has gone crazy the last few days, and to me that's maybe the one justification Nostalrius could have to justify why they would do this without any outside influence. If Blizzard's not involved, let's say, so in this scenario, just on their own motivation, Nostalrius may be doing this just to get more exposure to legacy servers again, because they're running out of ammunition. There's not much left Nostalrius can do to get people to talk about legacy servers. They've already released legacy server. They took it down in response to Blizzard. They released the database to another server. Now they're trying to take it back. I mean, what is left for Nostalrius to really put out there, I think it's very limited. So I don't think there's a lot left they can do. So this may be their last hurrah to try and get more media coverage, more people interested in legacy servers. So I could see that, and to me, then that makes, if that's true, then Nostalrius isn't really the villain here. They're kind of playing the villain, but they're not really the bad guy. So as you can see, I probably have some more faith in Nostalrius than a lot of people seem to. I see this as a team of people that have spent years, literally years, of volunteer service to release legacy servers and to support the movement. So I give them a little bit more leeway with this. I think a lot of people quickly turned heel on Nostalrius and are kind of bashing the crap out of him, to be honest. So that's scenario one. Scenario one, Nostalrius is doing this on their own, for their own motivation. No one else on the outside has influenced them. A little more evidence to that. There was a paste bin document that was leaked a day or two that was shown to be written up a couple days before Nostalrius made their announcement to revoke their database from Elysium, and that showed that the Elysium team at least knew a couple days ahead of time that Nostalrius was going to make this announcement. And now, that doesn't mean there's some big conspiracy theory going on, but it does mean that at the very least Nostalrius did coordinate this to some extent, even if in the last day or two just before the announcement, Nostalrius said, hey, Elysium, just so you know, we're going to do this. We don't want you to be caught off guard. So there's clearly some forethought going on from Nostalrius here, where they weren't just coming out to bash Elysium or cause chaos for people. They obviously thought it through enough to realize that it was going to cause a problem and gave Elysium the chance to know about it ahead of time. So that gives me a little more hope also that this isn't just Nostalrius, jumping off the deep end. This is Nostalrius with a bit of a plan and some goal in mind. Now, the other scenario, so that's the first scenario, is Nostalrius acting independently, and my opinion is that they're doing so for some, greater good in terms of legacy servers, where they either think they're going to get more exposure, or basically that's the main reason. I basically think that they're doing it to get more exposure for legacy servers, and they're running out of ways to do that, and this is their last attempt to do so. Now, the other option is maybe a second force is being involved here. And that second force in this case would very obviously be Blizzard. And that, maybe that's obvious to people, and I think it is to me, it just seems like the way that things are falling out. I really think this is an involvement of Blizzard specifically. So what I mean by that is we know for a fact that Nostalrius received cease and desist letters from Blizzard as far back as, let's see, when was it? I guess like early 2016, like maybe February 2016 is when they kind of mentioned that they'd received the letter. So we know that at least as far back as almost a year ago now, Blizzard has sent cease and desist letters to Nostalrius. Okay, and Nostalrius responded to those by shutting down their servers, right? And that started kind of the legacy server movement. So the question is, at this point, Blizzard has actually invited the Nostalrius team to visit them at the Blizzard headquarters to discuss legacy servers. They did that last summer, and Nostalrius took them up on the offer. A few of the people did, and they went to Blizzard headquarters. Now, my guess, and I've said this in other videos before, and I think I'll link that video down in the description here. My guess is that Nostalrius's plane tickets were paid for by Blizzard, and that Blizzard honestly knows who these people are now. They know where they're from. They know their names. They probably know enough about their bank accounts to give them a direct deposit to recover the plane ticket cost. And I'm not saying that Blizzard is a mafia that's going to go break their kneecaps, anything like that, but if I were a billion-dollar company and I thought someone were infringing on my intellectual property and I knew who the people were, I think it would be fairly easy for my team of lawyers to contact those people and just say, hey, you're still infringing on our intellectual property, we're going to take you to court if you don't stop. Now imagine you're the Nostalrius team. You have a job, you work full-time, you have a family you have to make money to support, and in your free time you work on WoW legacy servers like Nostalrius. Now, if it were me, if Blizzard came up to me and said, hey, you released your database, your core, you're still obviously pushing this stuff, our lawyers are going to get in touch with you very soon, unless you denounce it and back off from everything, I would very quickly just back off. I'd say, you know what, you're right, Blizzard, I am not going to continue this any further. We're going to make a press release, and we're going to say to not use our database anymore, not use our core, and we are done. We will never again be involved with private server emulation. Think about it from your perspective. If a billion-dollar company we're threatening you legally, and you knew they knew who you were. It's not like you're kind of an anonymous internet face. Like you were someone who has seen them in person. How quickly would you, do what they say in terms of either giving up emulating a video game or fighting against them and risking being sued by a giant company? I mean, I'm not justifying Blizzard's actions at all here if this were the case. This is all, kind of my thought or my theory on what's going on. But I would very quickly give up my video gaming passion or my video gaming hobby if it was, to save myself from the risk of being sued and losing a bunch of money or going to jail, and, interrupting my real life. Like, my personal life, my career, my family's life is much more important to me than video games. And I think most people would probably agree with that, and most people would not risk the rest of their life just to continue working on a hobby. And so, if you look at the wording of the Nostalrius announcement, it's very clear that they're basically like denouncing everything completely. They're saying this is not the right way to go. They're saying we need to back out of this private server emulation, and we need to find another way to push legacy servers. I mean, that's completely against anything Nostalrius has ever said, and I think it is extremely clear that they are doing this because they are under some duress. They're clearly stressed out, and I really don't. That's my major theory here is that they are doing this because Blizzard is, once again their lawyers have sent them a cease and desist, and you really there's only so many times you want to push a multi-billion-dollar company, in my opinion, as a team of maybe 10 people. Like, why? You're not going to win that court case. Even if you win the court case, you're still wasting a ton of time and money hiring a legal team just to defend yourself against this billion-dollar company. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you tuck tail and run is what you do when someone like Blizzard is coming at you. So that's basically my thought here is people are dragging Nostalrius through the mud here. I mean, completely just people are telling them to go kill themselves, all sorts of crazy things. And you can check this out on the Nostalrius official forums, the Elysium forums, the WoW subreddit. It's like WoW servers. I'll link all this in the description. I mean, people are freaking out at Nostalrius, and to me, first of all, I've said this so many times, WoW is just a video game. There's no reason to freak out at people and cuss at them and threaten them and do all these crazy things for a video game. If you disagree, then you just say, hey, Nostalrius, I don't agree with you. I think you're making a mistake, and you present a logical argument. You don't, freak out at them and just type a bunch of F words at them and drop all sorts of crazy things at them. So, first of all, I'm extremely disappointed in, the community. The private server community has shown themselves in this instance, I think, to be not any better than any other video game community. And here people talk about wanting to unite and push for this cause, but in the end of the day, they're still, I think, acting like babies about this. And they're acting entitled, I think. I mean, if you look at what Nostalrius has done, Nostalrius has dedicated, thousands of hours to release a good vanilla core, to release a server, and then to share their database of characters and their core with another server. They've done more, in my opinion, for the private server movement than any other group of people, because they actually took a stand when their server got a cease and desist letter. They shut it down, but they used that as an opportunity to push legacy servers. And in my opinion, no other group has pushed legacy servers harder than the Nostalrius team. I mean, if they had never existed, do you honestly think you would have seen the BBC writing an article on legacy servers? Seriously. The BBC had articles. There were all sorts of major gaming journalists that had articles. These are all things that happened only because Nostalrius went the route they did, and because they devoted so much time to making such a good server in the first place. Now, their server was never perfect, but it was a decent to good server. Certainly, their core was good. People saying it was a bad core don't know what they're talking about. People that saying it was perfect, they also don't know what they're talking about, but it was a good core. They obviously dedicated a lot of time to it. And so for people to completely drag them through the mud because they made one very strange announcement and seemingly against everything they've said so far, I mean, I understand people would be upset, but people need to calm down and realize that Nostalrius has done a lot for legacy servers, for the private server emulation scene. They've really put a lot of work in, and I honestly feel bad for the Nostalrius team. I feel like there's no way they're going to say Blizzard is telling us to say this, right? But in the background, if Blizzard is basically holding a lawyer is holding a gun to Nostalrius team's head, and they are being told that they need to back out of what they're doing here, they can't tell us that. But to us, they look like they're traitors, basically, right? They look like they are, throwing us in the mud. But to be honest, I think there's more going on here than most people realize, and I really think people need to back off and give Nostalrius a chance. Like, they've earned a little bit of faith, right? I mean, they've done so much in terms of the private server emulation, all these things, that this is the first time I can think of where I'm like, man, they really did something against what makes sense to me in terms of legacy servers and private server emulation. And I think that one mistake is not enough to completely remove all of the goodwill that they've earned, in my opinion. So I'm just asking people to, if they disagree, that's great. Post about it, share it with other people, tweet about it, whatever you want to do. Tell people why Nostalrius is making a mistake, but do not spit so much vitriol at them. Don't freak out at them for what they've done. I don't think they've earned the kind of hatred. I mean, it's truly like people are hating them, like they hate Nostalrius. Now people are like unsubbing from the Nostalrius subreddit and asking if you feel like you've lost all respect for Nostalrius. And like, no, they've done so many good things. It doesn't completely negate all of those good things because they made one strange scenario. So, you know, I understand most people probably disagree with me. I think most people honestly just think Nostalrius is scum and they're bad people and they've made a huge mistake. But I disagree with that, and I think as weird as everything is, I think there's more going on in the background that we're unaware of, and I think people should give them a little more benefit of the doubt here. But that's all I have to say. This video went a little bit longer than I intended, but I realized towards the end here I got a little bit more riled up about it. The main thing, again, keep in mind is there's two scenarios here. One, Nostalrius is doing this on their own without any outside influence. Two, they're doing it because the Blizzard team is influencing them to do so, and if that's the case, either scenario, I think there's a logical argument to explain why Nostalrius is doing so. I think we need to get them, back off a little bit, chill out, pump the brakes. Things are going to be okay. Life goes on. It's just a game. And that's all for today. So please comment below. Let me know what you think. If you disagree with me, I would like to discuss this with people. I want to even argue with people. It's great. But we can do this without fighting about it. Like, it's a game, right? It's not that serious. We can go on with our lives. So that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.